When I was young, I started experiencing visions that no one else could see. My mother, Galena, had the same ailment, but my father, Zimbal, saw it as darkness that would bring doom upon our tribe. He believed that the only way to appease the gods was to kill my mother by burning her alive when I was only 5 years old. The traumatic experience worsened my psychosis, and I repressed the memory of my mother's death, thinking she had taken her own life. Following my mother's death, Zimbal kept me locked up inside our home, physically and emotionally abusing me. He would belittle my condition and call it a curse. I was only allowed to leave our home to gather resources. On one such occasion, at the age of 15, I spotted Dillion practicing his sword fighting. I began to mimic his movements from a distance and eventually mustered the courage to approach him. He noticed my sword skills, and we became friends. Dillion encouraged me to participate in the warrior trials, which I agreed to. Dillion and I passed the trials and grew closer, eventually falling in love. He became my hope and my light, shining through the darkness that surrounded me. With his support, I decided to confront my father and leave with Dillion. Zimbal tried to stop me, warning me that I would have blood on my hands, but I refused to listen. I fended off my father with my sword and left with Dillion for good. After I left my home with Dillion, we started a new life in his village where I became a warrior. We were happy for many years until a plague struck my village, taking many lives including Dillion's father. I started to wonder if my father was right about my condition being a curse. Determined to protect Dillion and overcome the darkness that plagued me, I ventured into the wilds. There, I met Druth, an old scholar who was badly burnt from his attempts to escape his Northman slave masters. We bonded over his tales of Norse gods, which brought life to their myths and lore. Although Druth eventually succumbed to his wounds, he promised to aid me in this life and the next for listening to his stories. When I returned home, I found my village under attack by the Northmen that Druth had warned me about. In a gruesome display of a blood eagle, Dillion had been sacrificed to the Norse gods, and I suffered a psychotic breakdown. Remembering the stories Druth had told me, I reasoned that I could bargain with the ruler of Helheim, Hela, and win back Dillion's soul if I took his head to the Norse realm of the dead. With nothing left for me in my village, I embarked on a journey north. As I remembered Druth's instructions to reach the borders of Helheim, I found myself on the outskirts, ready to venture in. As I traveled further inside, pieces of my past started to come back to me. I remembered meeting and spending time with Dillion, as well as Druth's stories that helped me overcome the obstacles that faced me. However, at every turn, the voices of the Furies continued to both taunt and encourage me in a confusing contradiction. To make matters worse, I was also pursued by an entity called the Shadow, a dark manifested voice that discouraged me in my efforts to save Dillion, warning me that it would always be with me. Despite these challenges, I was able to defeat the fire god Surtur and the god of illusions, Volrovan, solving various problems in order to reach my two foes. This allowed me to unlock the bridge to Helheim, where I was confronted by Hela herself. My confidence wavered at seeing the source of my darkness, and as a result, my sword was shattered and I was knocked off the bridge. I barely survived the encounter and had to cauterize a head wound. It was during this time that I had visions of Druth and a man-shaped light, which I believed to be Dillion. I followed the light to a great tree, where I found a sword called Graymr, which Druth informed me was said to be strong enough to kill gods, such as Hela. In order to obtain the sword, I had to complete the 4 trials of Odin, which were related to my past. I navigated through a labyrinth, traveled through darkness while being stalked by monsters, evaded a fire monster in a swamp house, and solved riddles in a tower. It was a difficult journey, but I completed all 4 trials and removed the sword from the tree. However, the Shadow was not pleased and cast me into an apocalyptic place called the Sea of Corpses, asserting that I was responsible for the death around me. I battled a large horde of Northmen and managed to escape from the Sea of Corpses. I then started heading back towards Helheim. Upon entering the mountain where the bridge to Helheim was located, I was stalked in the darkness by a new enemy. The shadow informed me that the underground caverns in which I was navigating were home to a giant beast named Garm, which guarded Helheim. I used the light and torches to evade Garm, which only stalked me from the shadows. During this time, I lost Dillion's head as it fell into an abyss at the center of the beast's lair. I needed Dillion's head to resurrect him, so I journeyed into the center of the monster's lair and faced it in single combat, emerging victorious after a long battle. With Garm dead and the head reclaimed, I was told by the shadow that it had been trying to keep me from reaching Hela for my own safety, but it believed I had fought hard enough to earn the right to see beyond the veil of the darkness. Leaving Garm's lair, I repaired the bridge to Helheim, which was left damaged at the previous encounter with Hela, and finally entered Helheim. The Furies did not want me to face Hela, fearing that they would die along with me, but I left them behind and entered Hela's sanctum. As I entered, I realized that the shadow was my mind's manifestation of my father, continuing to abuse me even years after my village was attacked, and also learned the truth about my mother's death. As Hela herself spoke with the shadow's voice, I charged through an initial onslaught of Northmen, as well as a shadow taking the forms of Volraven, Surtur, and Garm, to reach Hela. When I eventually reached Hela's platform, she summoned an infinite amount of Northmen, preventing me from attacking her. I was eventually overwhelmed by my enemies, and Hela kneeled before me and took my sword. I both cursed and pleaded with Hela, claiming I was not afraid of sacrificing my life to save Dillion but also begging her to set him free. A whirlwind of emotions tore through my mind before finally, I told Hela that if Dillion could not be saved, then I had nothing left to live for, so she should just kill me now. Hela obliged and impaled me with my own sword. As I slumped to the ground, I recalled Dillion telling me of the importance of the acceptance of loss. Hela took Dillion's head to the edge of the battleground and let it fall into the abyss. Hela had become me, and the corpse on the ground had the appearance of Hela instead. With the guilt of losing Dillion finally lifted from my mind, I was able to accept that the voices in my head were not a curse or a darkness, but simply a part of who I am, and that it didn't cause all the plague, Northman invasion, or my mother's death. The hellish imagery of Helheim faded away. But this is not the end. Follow me and my newly returned Furies as we have another story to tell.